Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And in today's range report, we're going to be taking a look at a compact polymer striker fired pistol that many people think beats Glock. Yeah, another one of the Glock killers. But I'm anxious to find out if that is the case. This is also a range report revisit in some ways, because I have reviewed another variation of this exact model, and I absolutely loved it. And honestly, I thought it had one of the nicest triggers in a polymer striker fired pistol I had ever seen. And today we're going to be taking a look at the CZ P-10C, but this one was made in 2023, and it is the optics ready version. Now, some people online on the CZ forums are saying the newer CZs are not as good as the older ones. Some people claim that some of the manufacturing and assembly is now done here in the United States, where the older ones were all done in the Czech Republic. I can't comment to any of that, and I don't know how to really test for any of that, but that's just the general consensus I'm seeing across the web. Now, as I mentioned, this is the compact version of the P-10 lineup from CZ, which is their polymer striker fired pistol. They also have an F, which is the full size, and an S, which is the subcompact. Now, this being the optics ready version, we do have a hollow sun mounted to this pistol, so I am anxious to see if having this optic enhances my experience with this pistol as compared to the tactical version that I reviewed in the past. But before we talk about the things that I like and don't like about this pistol, and of course take it to the range, I always want to thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this very nice pistol. His name is Craig. He's a local fan and subscriber. In fact, he's lent other guns to the channel in the past, so thank you so much, Craig, once again for this opportunity. I always want to thank my Patreon supporters, because through their monthly donations and support, they help keep the lights on around here, and I couldn't do this without them. And if you guys want to join my Patreon and get to see all of these videos early, you can do that with a link in the description below, and you can join for as little as $1 a month. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor, who always provides the ammunition for these range reports, thus making them financially feasible for me, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And if you're here to watch a video on a review of a CZ P-10C, most likely you're a big fan of CZ pistols. You might even own a CZ75 or a CZ97, and you might be in the market for a set of unique and customized wood grips to make your fine firearm unique and one of a kind. Well, I have the perfect grip company for you. Brownworks. Brownworks is a custom grip company making a wide variety of grips for a wide variety of firearms out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials. Mark is an artist and he is a craftsman. He's always coming up with new and innovative features to add to his grips. He can apply custom logos, custom engravings, custom textures, finish these grips in a wide variety of colors, as well as apply exotic materials like snakeskin and alligator skin to make these grips unique and one of a kind. And as I said, if you're here watching a video on a CZ pistol, the CZ75 is one of Mark's specialties. So I'm going to ask you guys to go check out his website. I'm going to put a link in the comment section below, as well as a coupon code for 10% off your first order. So please go over and see everything Brownworks has to offer. And when you place that first order for these custom grips, please tell Mark the Texas Gun Vault sent you. Alright, so let's talk about the pistol we have on the table today. The CZ P-10C Optics Ready. The P-10 is CZ's polymer striker fired pistol. They offer this in the F configuration, which is the full size, the S configuration, which is the subcompact, but being that this is the C, it's about the size of a Glock 19. It is chambered in 9mm, and as I mentioned, this is the Optics Ready variation. And CZ has answered the call because red dots are now something that's pretty much standard on everything from concealed carry pistols to competition guns. And so instead of having to send your slide off to get milled out, you can now buy it right from the gun shop with a milled out slide. And you can go home, put on the right optics plate, and put on your favorite optic. And it's at a really good, affordable price. And I really think that saves gun buyers a lot of time and money. And that's the big advantage to this particular model. And as I mentioned in the opening of this video, the P-10s are known to have a great trigger. That's their reputation. In fact, the one that I reviewed before was outstanding. And I could say was probably one of the top 2 polymer striker fired pistols I had ever shot. The other one being the Steyr M9A1. But I do have a couple of comments about the trigger that is in this gun and a little bit of speculation. But before we go into the range footage and talk about the things that I discover when it comes to this gun, as always, I want to talk about the things that I like and don't like, and I always want to start with the positive first. And the first thing I like about this gun is that it is a CZ. Now, I fully admit that when I got into firearms 15 years ago, I really didn't know much about CZs. I got into guns loving Colts, and then HKs, and then Glocks. But CZs were never on my radar. They just weren't a brand that, for me, was something that was a known quantity. I was like, they're just made in the Czech Republic. How good could they be? They're just basic guns. Nothing about them stood out. And then one day I had the chance to take one to the range and review it. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe there's something to this. These are really nice and well-built guns, and over time I grew to really appreciate them. In fact, I have a few in my personal collection now. So it's one of those brands that I think you have to shoot and understand to really begin to appreciate. I'm also a big fan of the aesthetics of this gun. I mentioned that some people consider this gun to be a Glock killer. It's better than the Glock. And one thing this gun, I will have to admit, is definitely better than the Glock is the aesthetics. Glocks are blocky. This one has some curves to it. It's still a little bit blocky, but it looks a little bit more 21st century. We have some very nice aggressive texture on the grip. We have plenty of cocking serrations. I really like the aesthetic choices of this gun. I also like the fact that the optics ready comes with suppressor height sights. Even though we don't have a threaded barrel, this gives you the option of being able to use iron sights through the red dot if the red dot allows it. So if your red dot ever goes down, you do have that as a backup. I'm also a big fan of this mag release. This mag release is so easy to get to. It's in a very ergonomic spot, and unlike other guns that sometimes I have to reach around with my thumb to get to, that mag release is really placed well. And I know that's a weird thing to point out, but for me, this mag release is an absolutely the perfect place. And I really feel when I get to shooting this gun fast, I'll be able to change this magazine out really, really quick and well. But now let's talk about something about this gun that I don't like. And I guess this is going to be the big surprise, because it's going to be the trigger. Now, when I reviewed the P-10C in the past, I love the trigger, but there's something about this particular example, it doesn't feel as good. And this is the stock trigger in it, and I can't figure it out. Now, some people online have been saying the newer ones are just not as good as the older ones. The older ones were 100% made in the Czech Republic, but some people are saying these newer ones are partly assembled here in the US, and they might be contracting out different things to go in them. I don't know if that is true or not. That's just the words that I'm seeing on the CZ forums online. But all I know after handling this example is that this trigger is good. It's definitely not bad, but I remember the CZ P-10C having an amazing trigger. This one definitely feels heavy. There's a weird take-up to it. So maybe they've changed something in it? So the one thing I don't like is that it doesn't feel like the P-10Cs of the past. But I want to adjust the camera. I want to show you a close-up of this trigger, how it operates, and I want to get some measurements on it with the Lyman trigger pull weight scale. So let me adjust the camera and let's take a look at this trigger. And as I mentioned, the trigger pull on this example of the CZ P-10C just does not seem to be as nice as other examples I have fired. Now this is a later production, 2023, and many of the other ones I have shot were of earlier vintages. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or if they have changed anything internally in the gun. But I do want to show you this trigger up close before we weigh it with the trigger pull weight gauge. Let me go ahead and drop the magazine, ensure there is no ammunition in it. Looks like we are clear, and then we will safety check the firearm, and it also looks like we are clear. There is nothing in the chamber. Now let me show you this trigger pull, and this is the thing that I don't like. It's a little bit heavier than I remember with the other examples, but you'll pull it back to a point that you think you're at the wall, and then you're not really at the wall. Now that time it did break, but sometimes I'll pull it back. There I am, what I think is the wall, and it has a little bit of play in it before the trigger breaks, and it makes it not as predictable. I remember this trigger being very crisp, very light. This is heavier, and right at the wall you have this weird false stop where it gets a lot of resistance and then it breaks, and that feels a little bit weird to me. So that's the thing I don't like. The reset on this is pretty good, pretty short, tactile, audible. I do like that a lot. The reset on this trigger is awesome. But let's see if we can get some data from the weight of this trigger. Let me clear the averages on this gauge, and let's try this out. This can be a little bit tricky because of the shape of this trigger face, but let's see if I can get some accurate readings here. Our first pull, 6 pounds, 3.2 ounces. That is definitely a lot heavier than the other ones that I have shot. Let's try this again. £6, 2.6 ounces. I'm going to redo that one because it slipped a little bit. Let me go ahead and clear that one. Here we go again. Oh, that one's slipping too. I told you, this one's a little bit hard to get a good reading on because of the shape of that trigger. 5 pounds, 13.8 ounces. £6, 1.7 ounces. And I'm going to do this a few more times to try to get as much data as possible, because I know some people will complain about the gauge slipping a little bit. 5 pounds, 13.3 ounces. And let's try this one more time and see what we get. 5 pounds, 12.9 ounces. So as you can see, all these pulls are in the heavier 5s or the lower 6s. And for me, for a carry gun from the CZ line, that is a little bit disappointing. Now I know some people are gonna say, go send that off to Cajun Gun Works or buy one of their triggers. Yes, you can do that, but I really feel that this gun should have an outstanding trigger right out of the box. You can still change it out if you don't like it, but the other examples I have shot have been a lot lighter and a lot crisper. And so that's why I'm a little bit disappointed with the trigger in this particular example. So I'm really curious of what people are saying online, that the later models of these have something done here in the United States that has changed this trigger. Well, as I said, I can't test that out, but that's just what I'm hearing online, and this data seems to confirm that something is a little bit different as compared to the older models. So that's really the only thing about this gun that I don't like. So let's get this to the range. And as always, I'm going to start off with the target at 7 yards. And being the optics ready variation, I'm going to use the red dot. So I'm excited to see, does this enhance my shooting experience with this model? So let's go to the range and find out. And what did I discover? Well, first of all, I usually don't shoot red dots very well, and maybe that's the problem here. I'm used to shooting tighter groups with pistols, especially at only 7 yards. But I know some of you are already typing in the comments, Jason, you're a horrible shot. You shouldn't be reviewing guns. But it's just my experience. But we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I do have to say this gun is very comfortable to shoot. It's a very ergonomic gun and it fits my hands really well, and it has a very low recoil impulse. But now I want to try something. As I mentioned, I normally don't shoot red dots very well, but I can see these iron sights through the red dot. So I'm going to turn this red dot off and I'm just going to use the iron sights at the same distance. I'm just curious if that's going to change anything. So let's go back to the range and find out. And that is definitely a lot better. So is it me, or is it the gun, or something else? Well, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but I'm going to share with you something about this gun that I discover after the next range footage. But let's talk about this trigger. It feels like a Glock 19 trigger when you're shooting it. It's heavy, and because it has that weird take-up, it's a little bit mushy. As I said, this is definitely not a trigger that you would want to write home about and say, it's a Glock killer. But the recoil of this gun is lighter than that of a Glock 19. So there's some things about this gun, just shooting it, if you're thinking about comparing it to a Glock, that is definitely better. All right, so now let's double the distance on this target. Go out to about 15 yards, and I'm going to turn this red dot back on. I'm going to take my time and once again see if I can shoot this gun any better. So let's go back to the range and see what happens. And at 15 yards, it looks like I'm struggling with elevation, but not windage with this dot. And I can't figure out why. I was looking at it, everything seems to be mounted securely. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a bad shot with red dots, but I'm not this bad. But then I took a look at this from the side, and I noticed something really interesting. And if I can capture this right on camera, you might be able to notice that below the dot, right up here generally, under the plus sign, you can see there's a little bit of a gap there, a little bit of space. Now, I was thinking there was something wrong with the mounting hardware. So when I got it back here to the garage, I took out the screws and I made sure they were the right length, and they were. And I made sure that the mount is on the slide tightly and securely. And it was. But there's a gap in there. And everything on here looks to be secure. Now, could this be the dot? Yes. Could it be the mount? Yes. Could it be the slide? Yes. I tend to think it's either the mount or the sight. Now, I have to document my experience here, and some people say this will not be a fair comparison because their dot doesn't have this issue. How dare you review this gun? As I said, I don't know what the problem is, and I can only document my personal experiences, but this is not right. There is a gap underneath this sight. Now, if there is a problem with the mounts that come from CZ, well, that is worth noting. Could it be the hollow sun itself? Yes. So I'm not going to deduct points in this review necessarily for this problem. I'm just letting you know what I discovered. So I'm going to try to use iron sights for a lot more in this review. I'll continue to use the red dot a little bit, but this is important because the whole point of this gun is to be optics ready. And if there's something with this gun that's a little bit out of spec, you might have some major accuracy issues. All right, so that's what I discovered, and I'm curious what some of you are going to say. So now let's move on to the next part of this range report and the bench rest test. I'm going to try to take as much of the human element out of the equation as possible. I'm going to use the iron sights at 25 yards, and I want to see how accurate I can be with this pistol if I take my time and I'm not using this red dot that I don't think is mounted correctly. And that is so much better, and hopefully I redeemed myself in some of your eyes. I know some people out there say, Jason, you're a horrible shot. But sometimes when it comes to optics or sights or other variables with the gun, it messes with the accuracy. But I feel like these iron sights are right on. There's just something with this mount. And if it's a mount that comes from CZ, I really feel like they need to double check the specs of it. But as I said, because I'm not 100% sure if it's the mount, the slide, or the optic, I will not deduct any points in the end of this review because of that. Alright, so now let's talk about this gun being used as a defensive handgun, because most likely if you buy this gun based off of its size and capacity, you probably want to carry it for self-defense, and you want to know, will it run hollow points? I've actually had one CZ in the past that didn't run hollow points very well. Sometimes these European guns aren't designed for them, but this is a gun that's primarily designed for the US market, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to have any issues. So let's run some hollow points through this, just make sure they work and see how they perform. And as expected, this gun is running like a top. No problems with those hollow points. In fact, everything I've put through it, it's running just fine. No failures to feed, no failures to fire, no malfunctions whatsoever, and that is what I have come to expect from CZ. If I even had one issue with this gun, I would be very disappointed because their reputation and my experience with them has been outstanding when it comes to reliability. So the next test I want to do that deals with a defensive use is kind of a 3-in-1 test. Number 1, can I shoot this gun fast? How good is this trigger? Number 2, can I drop the magazine, get a fresh one in there, and get the gun back in action really quick? And number 3, is the gun point shootable? And the reason that I test that is I know a lot of us like to think, hey, I train with my pistol. But when it comes down to it, if you had to use your gun in self-defense, you might not have a lot of time to line up your sights, acquire that red dot. You might just have enough time and sense to yourself to point the gun at the thing you need to stop. Well, is this gun a naturally pointing firearm? And will it stay on target if you shoot it fast? So that's what I want to test. So let's go back to the range and test these 3 things. And let's break this down. Number 1, can I shoot this gun fast? Yeah, even with the heavier trigger, I can shoot it pretty fast. I'm happy with the rate of fire I can get out of this. Number 2, can I change out the magazine quickly? Well, yes I can, but I had a really interesting thing happen, and that is when I reinserted the fresh magazine, the slide went home, and I was not expecting that. I know these guns are not designed to do that, so that was a big surprise, and I was double checking to make sure my thumb was nowhere near that slide stop. So when I reinserted that magazine and that slide went home, it kind of shook me for a second. I was like, wait, that's not supposed to happen. And then finally, is the gun point shootable? It kind of is. I wasn't using the sights. It's pretty much all on target, but it's not the most naturally pointing firearm I have ever shot, even though the gun is very comfortable in my hand. So what are my final thoughts on the CZ P-10C? Well, it's not as good as I remember. And is that because this gun is a newer variation? I don't know. Have they changed something? from the older ones? Well, some people claim they have. The trigger is heavy, it has that weird take-up, but overall it feels really good in my hand. It has low recoil, and in that way it does beat the Glock. It's definitely a solid pistol, and if you're looking for a pistol that's not a Glock to carry, I think this would be a great option. But now let's talk about this optic and this mount. Is there a problem? I think there is. It could just be the mounting plate, or it could be the optic, and I'm not going to deduct any points, as I said, for that in this review. But if you own one of these or buy one of these, I would definitely double check. So on my star system, how would I rate the CZ P-10C? Well, it's a solid pistol, a solid offering, just not as good as I remember. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars for the CZ P-10C Optics Ready. What do you guys think? Is this a pistol that interests you? Do you love CZ pistols, and do you like the Optics Ready options? I would love to know in the comments section below. So, as always, thanks for watching. Pleasing lines to it. Find a mounting option for it. These, you might not have all the time in the world to line up your sights.